Now, there's a lot of things that ChatGTP, the artificial intelligence chatbot, is actually quite good at, but writing stories is not one of those. And I'm going to give you an example here. I'm going to read a story to you. It's a heartwarming story about a young girl and her pet monkey. And this was written by ChatGTP. And I want you to just listen carefully and think, what is it about this story that just doesn't work? What makes it so bad? Assuming, of course, that you think it's bad, which I hope you do. And after that, I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine who is a story expert, and he's going to take it apart. Okay, are you ready? This is the heartwarming story of a young girl called Sarah and her pet monkey, Max. Once upon a time, in a small jungle village, there lived a girl named Sarah. Sarah had a pet monkey named Max, who she loved very much. Max was a mischievous monkey, always getting into trouble and causing chaos in the village. One day, Sarah was sitting in her backyard enjoying a snack of peanuts. As she munched on the tasty nuts, Max suddenly appeared from out of nowhere and snatched a handful of peanuts right out of her hand. "Hey," Sarah exclaimed, "your monkey keeps stealing my peanuts." Sarah tried to scold Max and make him understand that it was wrong to take things that didn't belong to him. But the monkey just looked at her with a cheeky grin and scampered off into the jungle. Feeling frustrated, Sarah decided to set a trap to catch Max in the act of stealing peanuts. She placed a bowl of peanuts in the jungle and waited, hiding behind a tree. Sure enough, Max soon appeared and went straight for the bowl of peanuts. But as he reached for a nut, he triggered the trap and got caught in a net. "Gotcha," Sarah said triumphantly. Feeling guilty for trapping her beloved pet, Sarah quickly set Max free and apologized for her actions. And from that day on, Max never stole peanuts from Sarah again, and they lived happily ever after. So what did you think of that then? In case you're wondering how I used ChatGTP to generate that story, I'll show you at the end of the video. But first, I'd like to introduce you to a good friend and colleague of mine called Chris Rose. Chris and I work every summer at Nile in the UK as teacher trainers. And this was actually recorded during a recent lesson stream live. You see, Chris is the perfect person to speak to about this kind of thing. He is the story doctor. He's got a doctorate in literary theory and creative writing. He's lectured at many places, University of Birmingham, among many. He's also an author in his own right. He goes by the pen name CD Rose, and most relevantly, he's the author of this, the Biographical Dictionary of Literary Failure, which I really recommend. So let's find out if ChatGTP is going to make it into volume 2 of this book. Here's Chris.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Jamie, and thank you for asking me to give my my reflections on this piece. I found it quite a challenge, to be honest, because you kind of sprung this on me. I haven't had a long time to think about it, and if I had had more time to think about it, I could perhaps give a more considered response. But almost off the top of my head, having had a brief amount of time to look at this story and to consider it, well, as you said, I mean, there are many different ways and different aspects we can look at this piece of writing, this text, and one of them, I am assuming you asked me because I do have as Jamie said, I do have a PhD in stories. I am a doctor of stories. So looking at it kind of from that aspect, we could look at this story and we could take into mind it's analyzing it from a point of view of how a narratologist might look at it, and if you look at it, it certainly does have certain points of contact with Vladimir Prop's work, The Morphology of the Folktale, which some of you might know, in which Vladimir Prop was a Russian theorist about 100 years ago, a bit less, and he wanted to work out what connected all folk tales. So he defined a certain number of I can't remember what he called them, events. I think they were of things that happen in all stories. Things like a meeting with a stranger, a decision is made. These nodes of a story, and in some of those, you can see some of Prop's elements in there. There's the friendship, which is trouble. There is a sense of retribution at some point. So that we could consider it in terms of Roland Barthes' structural analysis of narrative, by again breaking it down into each points and looking very, very carefully at the very schematic way in which this story is presented, what constitutes one plot element and how that links to the next and how that links to the next. We could consider it in terms of Gérard Genet's questions of narrative time, the difference between narrative time and discourse time. Certainly those two things are present in this story. It could perhaps more successfully go all the way back to where narrative theory, at least in the Western tradition, begins, which is with Aristotle, from Aristotle's Poetics, what's become to be known as the three-act structure: the setup, the complication, the resolution, each involving rising action and falling action. And there is kind of a three-act structure here. We've got the stable situation of there's this girl happy with a pet monkey, and then something happens to upset that situation. And then in the third act, we have a re-establishment of a new kind of equilibrium. All those things, all those theoretical aspects of narrative certainly are present in this text. And yet, what do we have here? What do we have here? We have something which is story-like, but it's not really a story, is it? It's like one of those, if you ever drink something that's called a coffee-flavored beverage, and you think, because you've been expecting a nice cup of coffee, and you realize it's something kind of right, but it's not really anything that I would consider a story in any of its sense. Because what is it we go to stories for? What do we need from a story? Yes, a story can be seen as a mechanical interaction of a certain number of set plot points. But if that's all we have, then what do we have? Particularly in this context, where the plot points are very, very rote, very unsurprising, very methodical, very mechanical, very, very predictable in a certain sense. And there are so many other things that story can do for us and can deliver to us. Let's think about characters. I mean, when I'm working with emerging writers who are starting, who were trying to expand their practice, you can break it down into certain things, characters being one of them. One of the reasons we look at stories is to know about characters, to learn about other people, to find out about what ourselves, to think about extraordinary situations. And yes, certainly it's important that we have an idea of what E.M. Forster in his book Aspects of the Novel calls flat and round characters. There are flat characters who are very simple characters who just do one thing, just have one function in a story. And these are often contrasted with rounded characters who are shown to us in all their psychological depth. You can certainly tell a story, and a great story, by just having flat characters, which is certainly what we have here. These are flat characters. We know nothing about these people. Well, these people, we know a girl named Sarah. We don't know how old she is. We don't know anything about her background. She has no psychological interiority here, other than she feels guilty towards the end. Okay. Then we have Max, the other one. We know he's a monkey. We know he's mischievous. Okay, but these are very much flat characters. There is nothing more about them. There would be a chance of thinking about what you just told to us, Jamie. You can see how you might be able to expand on these characters, but you would need to do quite a lot of work, I think. Thinking also about Scott Fitzgerald's famous quotation that character is plot, plot is character, for Fitzgerald, the American writer, you know, Great Gatsby, all that. Everything, every kind of plot, every kind of story comes from character. And for him, it was finding your characters, what motivates them, what they're afraid of, what do they love. If you have a great character, you will have a great story. None of that here. There's not much story going to come out of these characters. Let's think about setting, which is another thing that's important in a story, or one of the great things that story can give us. Stories offer us the opportunities to visit other worlds very easily, to live in other worlds, this sense of an atmosphere, a place you want to be, somewhere where you want to spend time. Here, what do we have? A small jungle village, which is telling us nothing. We get no sense of how these characters, these people, or these animals might be related to their environment, how their environment shaped them, what they might be able to do to change it. We get no sense of the world building that goes around it, which great stories can offer us, that ability to spend time or to be in another world, in another place, to understand the sensations that another person might be feeling. And mostly, I think for me, while the plot is there, what is missing is, I mentioned Roland Barthes briefly before, and his idea of what we call jouissance, which is a kind of a pleasurable interruption or a breaking. What we would recognize from plot is the reversal, the upturn, the unexpected, something we didn't see coming. And we will all know that pleasure from a narrative, when we have something that, see, from the beginning, the settled structure, and that breaking, and that pleasure that we can get from not having anticipated what we think might happen. And it's exactly the same in a piece of music, for example. The unexpected key change or a tempo change is a shock, and it's a surprise, and it's what brings great stories to life. Jouissance, a sense of play or a sense of pleasure. In here, everything is predicated on its procedure. Everything is re-established as it was. There is nothing unexpected in here at all. The only interesting thing about this story, I mean, the only thing that made me kind of stop in what, again, to quote or to use an idea of Roland Barthes, we call the punctum. The punctum is the tiny detail, particularly he's talking about photographs here, but sometimes a tiny detail or something off that makes you stop and look again. And here, there seems to be an error, or what we might conceive of as an error, in the second paragraph, at the end of the second paragraph, where we have Sarah exclaims, "Hey, Sarah exclaims, your monkey keeps stealing my peanuts." Now, hang on, we've just been told in the first paragraph that it's her monkey. So who is she talking to? Who is this you that's being addressed here? Who is your monkey? Is there another monkey out there that we don't know about? Maybe also called Max in an interesting play. Who, or is it what you would call an extra diegetic poke out towards the reader, the sense of something reaching out to the text, this use of the second person to identify you as the reader? Suddenly I'm being addressed. What, my monkey? Oh no, I better go and check on my monkey. I'm terribly sorry, Sarah, that my monkey has kept stealing your peanuts. That error, that interruption, is actually the most interesting thing about this text. And I think we ignore these supposed errors at our cost. Just to bring up one other person who's not a literary theorist, but you might have discussed this already or brought it up. There's a singer and songwriter that some of you'll know called Nick Cave. And he was asked recently to respond to somebody who'd written a song in the style of Nick Cave using ChatGPT. Needless to say, or perhaps unsurprisingly, Cave's reactions were not positive towards this. Just to quote from, he responded at length to this, and he said, and I think this is very true, "Algorithms don't feel. data doesn't suffer. ChatGPT has no inner being. It has been nowhere. It has endured nothing. This is what stories can do to us. Stories connect us with other aspects of humanity, other aspects of ourselves, insights into what it might be to be another person. And that's why they're so important. And that's why they cannot be left to ChatGPT.
Wasn't that great? I don't know about you, but I think maybe it's just as well we didn't give Chris more time to prepare for that. So thanks so much, Chris. And I'll include links to Chris's books below the video, all right? Let me just quickly show you. This is quite interesting how I actually got ChatGTP to create that story. Quite simply, I said, can you write a story and include the following line? Your monkey keeps stealing my peanuts. So, I mean, ChatGTP didn't even get the task right. I mean, keeps stealing. Surely this wasn't a repetitive action. It only happened once as far as we were concerned. And your monkey? Whose monkey? My monkey? This is the only part as well, despite ChatGTP's getting it wrong. It's the only part that Chris seemed to take an interest in, that extra diegetic poke that he refers to, which is a new word for me. That's my word of the week. I'll be trying to use that more often. This is actually an idea taken from an activity in Lesson Stream membership called Your Monkey Keeps Stealing My Peanuts. So, well, thank you for watching, and thank you to Chris, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye-bye.